Hi, I'm David Koski, and welcome to this week's edition of the Maine Antique Journal. In past episodes, we have addressed antiques as objects. We've studied their history and the crafters who made them. In this episode and upcoming episodes, we're going to take a little different approach. We're going to see the people who are involved in antiques. This week we're going to be in Waldoboro, and we're going to visit with a family who, since 1973, has influenced the antique market in a very great way. So sit back, enjoy, and I think you're going to see a very different perspective on antiques and the people who are involved. We're here at the Maine Antique Digest in Waldoboro, and we're going to be speaking with Mrs. Sally Pennington. And her husband were the original founders of the Maine Antique Digest. So hi, Sally.
Okay, hi.
It's really nice to meet you and be with
Nice
you
to
here
meet
today.
you.
And we were talking a little bit before we went on air, and you were telling me a little bit about your husband,
Yes,
who is Sam,
yes,
and he just recently passed away
in February.
in February, and was the life and blood and soul of the magazine.
It was his idea originally. Sam was a 21-year veteran in the Air Force. He was a navigator. And we were stationed up in Newfoundland and Labrador for 6 years. And we were reading one time in a Toronto paper about the antiques section of Toronto. And he said, well, this is really interesting. We collected antiques in a minor way.
What year was this, approximately?
This would be in 1972. He
Okay.
was getting ready to retire. He retired in 1973, and we came here to Waldoboro. And we said, someone had sort of started a paper that was supposed to be about the antiques business in Maine, but it didn't really work very well. And he said, why don't we start a paper like that one we read up in Toronto, remember? And I said, we don't know anything about running a newspaper. And he said, oh, I bet we can learn. He was very good at writing and talking, and he just had this absolute love of antiques and the business of antiques. They all move around. Antiques, not just they just move constantly from place to place as people buy them and collect them. So we just sort of, we had bought the house years ago. It was paid for. We had these 5 children, and we had a pension from the Air Force, so that we knew we wouldn't starve to death if the newspaper didn't work. And we put about less than $3,000 into putting together a newspaper about the antiques trade. We called it Maine Antique Digest because we thought it would be Maine. That's it. And then we could call ourselves Mad, as long as we put the periods, so we couldn't be Mad Magazine.
Sure.
He wrote all the stories, he took all the pictures, and he went around and bought sold ads to all the dealers in Maine. We tried to advertise it in the back of Antiques magazine, and they said, oh heavens, no, you would be competing with us. And we thought that was a hoot. And we went then to a newspaper in Connecticut, the Newtown Bee, which was very well known.
Yeah.
And he said, sure, come on in, it's a great world, you'll love it. We had 5 subscribers when we mailed our first issue. That issue was mailed out by hand to every antique dealer whose address we could find anywhere, and the 5 subscribers.
Is this the first?
That's the first paper.
Wow.
It was 28 pages, as I say, written mostly by Sam, and with all these stuck-on addresses that we typed. The kids
Now,
did it.
the kids that are in the picture, are these all your children?
Yes. Those are our 5 children.
Okay.
Now this is the young man that you just met. That's Clayton, who is now the editor. She's also here. This is Kate, our oldest daughter. And these are 2 more of our daughters. And
Do they have names?
Yes. This is Sarah, who now lives in Texas. This is Nellie, who lives in Vermont. And this is Mary, who lives in Durham, Maine. All who are grown up now and married and children, and have given us 11 grandchildren.
And it looks like you're doing it at a wonderful Queen Anne table.
Exactly. A wonderful Queen Anne table that Sam made.
What? You're going
Sam
to have to tell
has-
me a lot more about him.
Sam was very good at woodworking, and he loved it. And when we were stationed in the South, in Shreveport, long before we started this, he was a navigator, but you have a lot of downtime.
And when did you guys get together?
At one point in 1958, I was in Fort Worth, Texas, teaching school, and he was in Fort Worth, Texas, at Carswell, not Carswell, yeah, maybe it was Carswell Air Force Base, flying a B-36, a navigator on a B-36, which was the biggest plane that they ever produced. And the people who flew B-36s just loved them. They could fill up enough fuel that they could fly from the United States to Russia, drop a bomb, and fly back without being refueled. Fortunately, they never had to do it. We found out, we sat and took a course in child psychology, and he had decided that maybe he would like to teach school someday. So we sat across the aisle from each other in a class in child psychology and talked all semester and found out that we both read avidly. I mean, we talked about books all the time and discovered that we both loved to read while we were eating a meal, which was forbidden by both of our families as being bad manners. Then after that class was over, he called me up one day and said, "I have tickets to go to the Canadian Royal Ballet. Would you like to come with me?" And I thought, wow, most people in Fort Worth invite you to go to the rodeo or something like that.
Sure.
And this guy must be really nice. So we went, and we hit it off. And then he came in, 4 months later in April, he said, "I'm being transferred to Louisiana, and I think we should get married." I thought, gee, okay, fine. We were older. I was 26 and he was 28. We had been through all the, teenage stuff, and we got married. And that was 50 years ago in April.
Wow.
And it was most fun.